This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are the things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we are happy to welcome back Jon Meoli, the Baltimore Banner. He's here to break down his new top 10 prospect list for the Orioles farm system over at Baseball America. And we will get to that in just a minute. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC. Head to BetOnline today and don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now, over the weekend, we had a little bit of a rush over at Patreon with a Black Friday sale, and we're happy to report we've got a couple new members to welcome to our community. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, Patreon allowed us to do some sales, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that. So, hang in there. If you didn't catch this one, there's always another one around the corner. But thank you to Brian Johnson and Philip Zanti for joining the Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the content and appreciate the support.
And with that, now I will introduce tonight's guest. He's a writer over at the Baltimore Banner. You can read his work on the Banner's website and get it delivered directly to your inbox with the Inside the Dugout newsletter. He also recently wrote up the top 10 rankings over at Baseball America for the Orioles farm system. It's a little bit of a teaser for the larger top 30 that will be out sometime next year. He is Jon Meoli. Jon, how's it going?
Great. Good to be back, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just went back through our archives. This is your first appearance since June. It's been a while.
June 28th, my family got a little larger. It was funny. I was looking through my notebook of like my minor league games, and I went to a game on the 26th, I think. I was like, I just need to see Michael Ferret before this baby comes.
I remember you talking about that.
And, I did. And then it got a little harder to do a lot to and we're through it now. So, but it was it's been too long. I usually enjoy the one where there's beer too. So we'll have to do that again soon.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember a lot of Taylor Swift talk last time you were on.
Yeah, that was big.
You've been doing this list at Baseball America for some time now, going back to the pre-Elias regime, as well as a run through 3 straight top 100 prospects that the Orioles had recently. How does this ranking differ from what you've done in the past?
It was very different in a lot of ways, and it was similar in a lot of ways. Let me get to the similarities first. I spend much more time thinking about who's going to be number 10 than who's going to be like 2 or 3, because they're all on the list. But like the cutoff for 10 and 11 on the Baseball America list is what goes online, and that's just like challenging. No matter if like the 10th guys, no matter who the 10th and 11th guys are, that's challenging. I remember I caught a bunch of flack for putting Chris Lee over Keegan Aiken in that spot in my first year, and I didn't stop hearing the end of it. Like I never heard the end of it, and I was wrong, but like it's PTSD on that. So it was similar in that sense. Very different in kind of the top heaviness. I guess it was top heavy in those like late Duquette years when you kind of knew who the guys were, and then you knew that there weren't a lot of guys beyond that. It's different now in that you know who the guys are at the tippy top. But I think it felt starker as you got down towards the bottom of the top 10 that there wasn't a huge difference between, 7, 8, and 17, 18, that type of range. And that was pretty unique. I feel like some of the trades and the recent turnover in the organization more broadly with guys graduating made it so that there there was a real like parity in those spots that felt different, even though it's always kind of bunched together in those areas.
Nice. I love the Chris Lee reference to start off the show because I have baseball right next to me over here that's autographed by Chris.
I liked him. He was a good guy. It was good stuff when it was good.
Yeah. We're going to talk about a lot of pitchers that hopefully pan out much better later on. But at the top of your list there, it was Samuel Basallo, Kobe Mayo, obviously 1-2 there. You dropped a lot of great nuggets, I thought, in your chat over at Baseball America, specifically about Basallo. The work on his defense behind the plates, how bright this guy is in his baseball mind. But what made you go with Basallo at 1 over Mayo in this year's rankings?
So that was pretty close. Baseball America in their midseason rankings had it flipped and had Kobe Mayo first and Basallo second. I kind of reverted to what I had in last year's offseason rankings. I think there's a couple things that put Basallo over the top for me. One of them is his age. He's, clearly, a little farther along at this stage of his career than Kobe Mayo was. I think there's a little more certainty in terms of the contact ability and the ability to get to the power with Basallo at this stage than there is with Kobe Mayo. That's not to say that Kobe Mayo is not going to get to it. And I always feel strange in these like types of conversations when I say one person does one thing well. It's not to say the other one doesn't. But I think there was a combination of the age, the contact ability, and the ability as a hitter and the ability to tap into that power in a game situation. And I think, if we're sitting here right now, there's a better chance that Basallo will catch than there is that Kobe Mayo will play third base in the big leagues. And if they're both playing first base, I think, and you have that like leveler, you're talking about two really good hitting first basemen. But I think Basallo, even if you took out the defensive profile of both of them at the same position, you'd probably take Basallo where he projects to be over Kobe Mayo at this point. But it was close. I just think there's also like another level for Basallo to get to. I wouldn't be surprised if he just destroys AAA next year. And that's not to say that Kobe Mayo didn't destroy AAA this year. It's just there's a little more to dream on with Basallo at this point.
I've seen a few different fans shouting, trade Mayo for Crochet, trade Basallo for Logan Gilbert. You see any chance that the Orioles trade one of Mayo or Basallo at this point?
It feels challenging to me. I've not been, I've learned to not say, they since we did this talk last year, talking about who they could trade, like they have made a lot of trades for these guys. So it's not a never thing. I think they like these players a really, really lot. And I think there's, you didn't want to trade when you had a lot of really, really good high-end prospects. You didn't want to trade them because they were going to make up the core of your lineup. And you saw that's a core of a really good lineup this year. Now it's kind of in the opposite end of that spectrum where once you get past the top two, maybe three, if you want to like put like a 25, soon to be 26-year-old Heston Kjerstad in that range, like you're talking about a very finite amount of those guys you really think can be impact bats and really help your lineup. So the idea of trading them at this point feels challenging to me. But we are still in the learning phase of like how this whole, like we're going for this is going to go. I would not have predicted that the amount of prospects traded in the last year, who were on last year's list, who would have been on this year's list would have happened just because it hadn't happened before. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, I was telling these guys before the show started that I'm still mad Moises Chase got thrown into that Gregory Soto deal. But to me, teams don't trade their elite prospects. They trade their good prospects, which I think maybe Kjerstad is closer probably to top end, but I feel like he's the best prospect we could potentially see move this offseason. But speaking of Basallo, who do you feel will be the next international breakout star for the Orioles?
So there's a couple who kind of pushed themselves to the top of the list. I think that there was a lot of excitement with some of those guys who spent most of the year in Delmarva and got to Aberdeen with Tomas Sosa and Aaron Estrada and Leandro Arias being the top group in that. I think they really, really like Steven Martinez from this year's draft. Jordan Sanchez also is somebody who could end up skipping Florida and going right to Delmarva, given he's a little older. But there are a lot of players with the types of skills that will allow someone to succeed. You mentioned Moises Chase, though. Like, that guy was around forever. And he was always pretty good. I remember my early newsletter days when he got to Delmarva, the pitching coach there was like raving about him. And this is his first year as a teenager in Delmarva. And then he's there for 2+ years, almost, basically 2 years, gets to Aberdeen, takes a step, and, it just takes a little longer, especially without kind of the short season ball that they used to have for players who are kind of transitioning out of the complex leagues. It takes a little longer. So I don't know. I mean, if there is another Basayo type breakout, you're talking about a real player, but I'm in kind of the recalibration phase of like, all right, like, let's see who survives Delmarva, and then like, where are those skills and how do they kind of improve and show themselves as they survive that long season in Delmarva, because it is there are some bodies, it takes a toll on people.
Yeah, it just reminds me of Frederick Ben Cosme. It's like he showed up at Delmarva, looked like, oh, this guy's breaking out. And he's performed well. He's performed fine. I think he's maybe a future bench player, utility player type, at least as of right now. Love the guy. But, I guess you got to see him get past Delmarva, and then you really know for sure what you got.
Yeah.
You've written about this, and all four of these guys were ranked inside your top 10, and that's Dylan Beavers, Judd Fabian, Enrique Bradfield Jr., and Vance Honeycutt. As you pointed out, they collectively represent a real litmus test for the Orioles, which is, can they take high upside but high risk bats in the draft and make them into more well-rounded hitters? What specific adjustments do you think the Orioles can make to accomplish that goal? And I know it's a little bit different across the board because Bradfield's questions are different than Honeycutt's, but what do you think specifically they're going to be working on with these guys?
So I think that you put them in two buckets with, like, Fabian and Honeycutt kind of being like a souped up version of him, with a little bit louder tools and kind of the same issues. Like, the guys you're trying to get to make more consistent contact, a lot of that seems to be swing type stuff. I know with Honeycutt, they're doing a lot to try to get his body more connected so that his base is where he needs to be to get into the positions, because when you have the ability to hit the ball as hard as he does, you want to get the bat through the zone in a consistent way that allows you to do that more often. So I know there's a lot of work in terms of his base. It's all, these aren't my words. These things I was told, trying to keep him more connected and his swing more in line. That's something that, Judd Fabian's been doing for a couple of years now, and trying to, get his swing playing a little truer and less uppercutty, be able to combat those balls at the top of the zone. And he's done a good job of that. He's somebody, last year when he got to Bowie, he struggled, and then he had a pretty good season at Bowie, and this year he got to Norfolk and struggled. And I think players like that, you need to give the benefit of the doubt that they can do that again. Same with somebody like Kobe Mayo, and you've seen Creed Williams a couple times do that. So with Honeycutt, it's a lot of movement and swing pad stuff to try to find something that's consistent and adjustable. They don't believe there's any kind of like pitch recognition issue. There is a lot of swing and miss, but not because he's getting fooled. It's because he's not consistently putting his body in the positions that they think are the best for somebody like that to do that. So that's on one side of the spectrum. Then you have the Dylan Beavers, Enrique Bradfield Jr. of guys who make fantastic swing decisions, guys who make fantastic contact, don't swing and miss a lot, and need to hit the ball consistently hard at good angles to maximize that skill that they have. Dylan Beavers has done a ton of swing work over the last couple of years. I talked to him a lot about it in 2023, less this year, but some still. And he started the year in a position where he was told, and he wanted to take more, quote unquote risks and be a little more aggressive in counts where he could drive the ball. And he was doing that in Bowie. It did not show up towards the second half of the year. He kind of had to pick it up down the stretch, and he had, ended up getting his way to Norfolk and doing all right with that. But it's a little different with Bradfield, where you're not going to judge him based on, are the exit speeds elite? Is he making, consistent hard contact? With him, you're basically looking at, is this guy hitting line drives? And it was explained to me that when he got to Bowie, they tried to focus his already very good swing decisions even more finely, because he is so good at making contact that you basically have to be okay with whatever pitch you swing at being the last pitch of your at bat, because you're going to make contact with it, and if you swing at a pitch that you can only hit on the ground, you are going to hit it, and it will probably be on the ground. And as you go up the ladder and you're facing good defenses, even as fast as you are, that's not the contact you want to make. So there were a lot of gains, and I know there's a lot of people in the organization who are very, very bullish on how he performed in Bowie because of that, because of that enhanced focus, I guess you could say, on the pitches he was swinging at. The quality of contact in terms of like some of the underlying data, it was similar between Aberdeen and Bowie, but I think the results and the way that he got to those results were more encouraging than I think some of the Aberdeen results. So it's a challenge. I don't think, I think with Beavers and Fabian, it's pretty interesting that you have guys that were basically on the opposite end of the spectrum and what they need to work on and improve on. And they've both worked on it and improved on it. And they basically had the same AA season this year, almost identical, like cumulative AA stats between them. So, these guys are in AAA, and I don't think there's any rush to get them through, to get them beyond that. But I think there's going to be a really good opportunity to show that those things have taken hold. Honeycutt, I think there's a huge ceiling there. I mean, you can't not think that. And given that he and Bradfield do so many things really, really well, whether it's, play center field, whether it's run, whether it's steal bases, like that's going to be really, really fascinating as to who ends up being able to hit in a way that allows them the rest of those skills to show up, because there's real, there's top end potential with both of those guys in such different ways.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
It took a lifetime to find the person you want to marry. Finding the perfect engagement ring is a lot easier. At BlueNile.com, you can find or design the ring you've always dreamed of with help from Blue Nile's jewelry experts who are on hand 24/7 to answer questions, and the ease and convenience of shopping online. For a limited time, get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more with code POD at BlueNile.com. That's $50 off with code POD at BlueNile.com.
When I think about these players, I tend to see Bradfield as the safest of the group because he doesn't strike out very often. He rarely strikes out. As you mentioned, he has very good contact skills. And that elite speed and defense combination would seem to give him a really high floor. Are there more adjustments that he needs to make than what meet the eye, or does he really feel like of those four, the one that's perhaps the most likely to get to the majors and stick, even if he doesn't have the highest ceiling?
I feel like those are like really translatable skills. So I think that's probably, as I'm thinking about it right now, that's probably the case where like you're talking about the highest floor and the ability to do all those things. There are a lot of ways to get to the big leagues and not hit like a big leaguer, which is like it's not what I want to say. It's, I guess, is what I'm going to try to say. Like the same things are also true with, Vance Honeycutt also would be able to play like everyday center field and play it at a really, really high level, and would also be a threat to steal bases. And he would also, as constituted right now, struggle to hit for what you would want him to. And I think there's a risk where Bradfield has the same issues, just makes a lot more contact, and it doesn't really result in any, in a lot of hits. But I think that having that floor for both of them, honestly, although I think there's more risk with Honeycutt, having that floor really allows you to attack what you need to attack and feel like you're not, everything is riding on those things, but it's not as if everything is riding on them and like, I can't do anything else if I can't do this thing that I need to get better at.
Yeah, I mean, even if, say, Fabian, Honeycutt, they don't reach their potential with the offense, they seem like perfect fourth, fifth outfielders in the major leagues for a decent amount of time, even if they kind of bust or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, and I think all four of them are big leaguers. You can't look at the Honeycutt's power, and that's why I had him above all the rest of them. You can't look at Honeycutt's power and not think that's and not get excited about that. Now, is it going to happen? Like, who knows? Who knows with all of these guys? But this is, I don't want to say they had practiced with Judd Fabian, but this is what the Orioles hitting program is designed to do, is to find ways to help guys get more consistent, make more contact, and then it goes.
Yeah, I have two quick follow-ups about Bradfield and Beavers, but as we're talking about all these outfielders, lumping them together, I also feel like in a year, maybe this time next year, we're talking about another guy in Austin Overn, the pick out of USC last year. That's another guy who's getting 70, 80 grade speed and fielding grades coming out of the draft. So just a stupid amount of these types of hitters. But with Bradfield, I'm just curious if I feel like when we talked to Anthony Villa last year, I kind of got the sense that maybe there was a hint of they might try to get more power out of the bat. Do you think there's any chance of now that he's in Double-A, do you think you see any attempt to get more power out of Bradfield's bat, or are they really just going to lean into that, keep the strikeouts low, keep lowering the ground ball rate, and let him ride as this top of the order table setter type guy?
I think that I don't hit for power. I think that the focus is going to be continue to hit hard line drives. That's not to say that the way that Bowie is laid out, you can't sneak some balls down the right field line and end up with a handful of home runs. But I think his power is going to be, if you hit a line drive in the gap and you're that fast, even if it's the right center field gap, that's a double. That is his power. That's where his power is going to come from. I'm just trying to, as we're talking about this, making for terrible audio. I think year to year, a lot of the exit velocity stuff with him was kind of flat. This is terrible. I'm sorry. Yeah, relatively little. Actually, 90th percentile is 1 mile an hour higher. 98.9. Okay. 98.9, 99.7. Yeah, so there is that progress there, but I think it's going to be measured more. He's not going to be hitting the ball, as hard as Van Honeycutt. He's not going to be hitting the ball as hard as those guys, and I don't think they want. There's no expectation that that's what's going to allow him to be the best player he's going to be. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard line drives. It's going to be hitting the ball at consistent angles. Honestly, when I looked at his season when I was checking in, I wasn't looking at, I would look at the OPS and those types of columns, but I would also scroll down on Fangraphs and all right, what's his ground ball rate? Is it better than it was last year? Is it higher, lower? What about line drives? And that is what they're evaluating it on, to put it as simply as possible.
Nice. And the 125 stolen bases he's going to get up there.
Yeah, all the bags.
But with Beavers, it just feels like I feel like you could start your own podcast series about Beavers and doing the full breakdown here, because we knew it was going to be this big project coming out of Cal. Like you mentioned, you followed his journey in that case study type series the other year. The power was really impressive at the start of the year, and then it kind of disappeared. But you talked about how taking more risk and such when he was with Bowie. There's some fans who will say are not impressed at all with his defense. But you mentioned in your write-up that his defense improved this year. Your line was he remains among the most enticing. His upside remains among the most enticing in the Orioles organization. I found that line fascinating. Almost feel like among the diehards like us, there may be a bit of like prospect fatigue settling in already with Beavers. Like everybody's throwing him in every trade proposal there is out there. Just as we go into 2025 and he's going to get this first taste of AAA, like zooming out a little bit to look at Beavers, like, I mean, what is his ceiling if he were to remain in this organization?
Yeah, I mean, his ceiling, like, you could easily see like somebody who makes a ton of contact and hits like 15, 20 home runs if he figures out like how to consistently, for him, hit the ball hard and do it consistently. I think that there's definitely like a blessing and a curse, balance to his desire to make his swing better and to figure things out. It took a while in 2023 to just be like, all right, I'm just going to do this. And like, I am working on stuff, but I'm not like going to be standing in the batter's box with the lights on and 75 people in the stands working on stuff. Like I'm going to let it rip and then do the work before the game. And I think when I say that about his upside, because when you look at somebody, with his body, who's getting stronger, who's still really athletic, he's a really good runner. And I was told by a couple people that, they thought his defense got better this year. You're talking about like a true guy who can impact the game in a lot of ways. And, there was a pandemic mixed in. There was a whole year where college guys who could have, stubbed their toe for 4 months in Aberdeen didn't play at all. And then just like we're all shot out of a cannon through the minors and we're in Norfolk within a year. And, that was really rare. The volume of guys who tore through the Orioles system in like 2021, 2022 was really, really like outsized. That's not really how it normally goes. Dylan Beavers to have spent most of his second full pro season in Double-A and been good, not great, is not terrible. It's not, that doesn't put you on the level of like Colton Cowser, who would have been in the big leagues at that point. It doesn't put you on the level of, Joey Ortiz or Connor Norby, who at that point were ripping up AAA. Like, it doesn't put you at that level, but it doesn't put you at any kind of disadvantage. It's just kind of a realignment to like regular player development and regular, a more traditional trajectory. And truthfully, the Orioles have a major league lineup and the talent base at that level where it's okay that guys are taking a little bit longer if they need it.
I think I have a decent comp for Dylan Beavers if he reaches his potential. Christian Yelich minus 2018 through 2020 when he was hitting home runs.
Yeah, I mean, that was the comp. That was who people were kind of looking at coming out of college and were like, if this clicks, it's the same type of thing. It's just arms and legs and, contact and athleticism and, you can dream on it. And I think that's something that, a lot of people would take if that's what it is.
Certainly.
All right. Going to pitching for a little bit here, our favorite topic among these prospects. You mentioned his name, Michael Ferret. The buzz is growing this offseason, which love to see it. I know we've talked about him a lot. We saw that Tread tweet before the season about all the adjustments he made with his arsenal and the weight he gained. I thought it was like 8 pounds something it said, but then I think they just put out another video. He's like, I gained like 20 pounds. He's bigger. He's stronger. He's got this revamped arsenal. I was skeptical, but I remember the first time I watched him on MILB TV, it was like, this is not a JUCO kid who they took late in the draft, holding his own, looking like this poised veteran here in Delmarva. You got to see him live at the end of the year. What were your major takeaways with Ferret? And I know you last time you were on, you talked about the buzz he was garnering with internally in the organization. What is the latest buzz on Ferret after his first full year?
Yeah, I mean, they're really high on him for all the obvious reasons. There is kind of a baseline at this point, and it's crazy to say, but like there's a lot of pitchers with really good stuff in this organization. A lot of the guys who entered it with decent stuff and have improved it. I was struck as I was kind of making some calls on him. He really impressed the Orioles, through the draft process, and basically like laid out like everything he was going to do, like in the offseason, to make it so that he was going to be the best version of like what he could be coming into this year. He did that in spades. They really liked the way he worked. He's constantly adding and tweaking his repertoire. Even from the time I saw him in June, when I finally wrote about him, I think it was probably a month or so later, I was checking in on what he was throwing, and I was just getting all these like, well, some days he throws this change up, some days he throws that change up. We're working on this. Stay tuned for that. There is a constant, that's what this pitching department is about. This is what they really like. They like guys who can make those kind of adjustments, who can manipulate the ball, who can have all the kinds of weapons that you're going to need at the big league level to get hitters out. And he's just checking a lot of those boxes early on. And I think the command component is what separates him. He has really, really good command. He knows how to use his pitches really well. He has a good idea of how to pitch. Those are things you can't really teach. Guys who have that at that stage, it typically works out pretty well for them. So I think there were a lot of reasons why he was the next guy beyond Chase McDermott. There were other contenders, but it just felt like he really distinguished himself at a young age as somebody who warranted that kind of recognition.
So we'll continue with the pitchers. There's only 2 pitchers in the top 10, Ferret and Chase McDermott, but there's a big group of high upside pitchers that have been developed over the past couple of years. How would you put the state of pitching throughout the organization?
It is, the arrow is pointing at a very steep angle upwards. I feel like we talked about that on this. I don't know if it was the top 31 or this one last year, where we talked about like this was kind of brewing. There's a scout I've known for a long time who I trust trust a lot of the things he says, pretty not blindly, like, I'll ask him follow-up questions, but, he tells me things and I believe them. He was in Aberdeen and Delmarva towards the end of the season. He saw, guys like Nestor Herman, guys like Trey Gibson, and was really impressed with the stuff. Those guys were in the mix to be in the top 10. And you could have given me, 75 guesses as to guys who I would be thinking about for the top 10 this time last year. And I don't think I would have gotten to either of them. They were clearly in the mix. He went to Delmarva and just kind of assumed that anyone who had been there all year was not going to be, anything special, and saw a bunch of pitchers who was like, why are these guys still here? They were just the depth and the volume of pitchers with, high quality weapons who are able to strike guys out and limit damage is it's really impressive. It's not something that's happened by accident. There's a really, really good process, and I think you started to see that over the last couple of years of identifying the types of guys that these pitching coaches can work with and letting them work with them. And from the 2022 draft, 2023 draft, you're talking about guys who are second and third day picks who are on track to make an impact in the big leagues, and that's not something that a lot of organizations can say they get out of their pitching.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Getting engaged can be stressful. Getting the right ring won't be at BlueNile.com. The jewelers at BlueNile.com have sparkle down to a science with beautiful lab-grown diamonds worthy of your most brilliant moments. Their lab-grown diamonds are independently graded and guaranteed identical to natural diamonds and ready to ship to your door. Get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more with code POD at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com, code POD for $50 off.
We'll go back to Kobe Mayo. We know that he struggled during his little bit of a taste of the majors last year, but that does not seem to have soured the organization's view of him, nor should it. With that said, if we're looking short term, does it feel like that he maybe could follow the Colton Cowser path of get much better over the offseason, make the team out of spring training and stick? Or do you think that there are adjustments he could go back to Norfolk and make, at least offensively?
I think that is, I think there's a really good chance of that. I don't know how you make this Orioles team on the infield if you're not already in it right now. If Jorge Mateo and Ramon Arias are going to be back, it seems like Jorge Mateo is going to be pretty close to healthy by opening day. Those guys are, just because people want to get rid of them, both of them at different times doesn't mean that would be a good idea, considering what they're able to do when they're called upon, when plan A and B goes badly. It's just good to have. It's going to be really hard to make this team out of spring training on the infield if you're looking at it right now. But Kobe Mayo has demonstrated at every stop in his professional career, whether it was, getting to Bowie at the end of his first full season with that Cowser, Connor Norby group, and kind of taking his lumps a little bit, and then getting to Bowie the next year and having figured out a lot of the things that he needed to do better and having a really, really good year. He spent some time in AAA adjusting last year. He ended up having a good 2023 second half overall in Norfolk, but it took some time to get there. And then he came back having learned all those lessons, improved on what he needed to improve on, and dominated the level. The majors and big league pitching created a situation where all of the things that he spent these last 2 years working on, it was just an opportunity to see in real time, unfortunately, on television every night that like those things can be challenged at a higher level than the minors can challenge them at. So it's really, I think, just a continuation of the work he's been doing, which is good because he knows how to combat those things. He knows how to, work to combat outer half spin. He knows how to, be adjustable and do all those things. He just has to do it at a higher level because Major League Pitching is at a higher level. So I think there's plenty of capacity to do that. And like I said, with Judd Fabian, I'm starting to understand and give a bit of grace to people who have demonstrated that they can show that they can learn at a level and come back and do it. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he comes back and is much better in the big leagues than he has been. And I also think it's important to know, I looked at this kind of midseason as there were a lot of guys languishing and not really playing in the big leagues, like projection systems, which teams rely on because they're pretty accurate. If you have 600 really, really good AAA plate appearances and 40 bad ones in the big leagues, they're going to weight the bad ones a little bit, but not that much. It's not going to change who you are going to be going forward just based on a little tough cameo like that.
Like it. I do want to just a quick note. You don't have to go into super detail here as we wrap up the prospect list section, but rounding out your top 10, you did have Griff O'Farrell. Just curious, because that was a pick. I know when we did our live draft show, we were I don't want to say bummed, but he just seemed like a solid pick. The defense is good. Obviously, the makeup is off the charts from what we heard. I watched him a ton at UVA. He's 30 minutes down the road from me, so I watched him a lot in my backyard here. Don't have any issues with him, but I'm just curious, what is the upside with O'Farrell? Do the Orioles see something more with him in your conversations with people?
Yeah, I think it's like a sum of the parts type deal. It's not like there's going to be one or two true carrying tools where you're like, oh, this guy does this really, really. He's going to do everything pretty well. He's going to have, he's going to help you win. He's going to make good swing decisions. He's going to make a lot of good contact. He's another guy in that Beavers Bradfield box of all right, we know you can put the ball in play. Let's try to focus it and do some damage. I think, truthfully, there's also an element of like, it's nice to have just a couple of decent floor guys. This is a farm system, especially in the upper and mid minors, where you're not talking about, especially since the trades, a guy like, somebody like Matt Horvath, like Matthew Etzel. Those are guys who were performers and had decent floors and good tools, and you feel good about. They're not going to be like lighting up the top of the list, but there's like a baseline with somebody like O'Farrell where you're like, all right, yeah, like you're going to do this well all the way up through the ranks. You're going to get better. You're going to help your team win, and like you can do that all the way to the big leagues. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And that is historically, that those kind of like sandwichy, like early 30s picks. The Orioles have a pretty strong track record of finding guys they like in those. And I think there's, given his pedigree, given his, skill set, there's a good foundation to build on there, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And I think when you're talking about putting that up against, pitchers who are, yes, having really good years and had breakout years, I think there was kind of a comfort, honestly, in putting somebody like that who you have a pretty good idea is going to be pretty good.
So he's Jordan Westberg 2.0, basically, is what you're saying.
That would be something that I think everyone involved in that pick and who works for the Baltimore Orioles would take in blood.
Yeah. So outside of the top 10, the guys who just missed, your full top 30 will be out soon, but do you see anybody just outside of your top 10 who could take a solid leap this year?
Yeah, let me pull up. I should have this up. I'm sorry. I think any of those pitchers, honestly, are going to be in that mist. The Nestor Herman, the Trey Gibson, because at this point you're talking about guys who are going to be, pitching well in Double-A, and if they're on the current trajectory that they're on now, that is meaningful in the broader, industry. That's where people take notice. That's where you start to raise some heads, raise some eyebrows, turn some heads. I'm sure I don't know if we've talked about him or I know you guys have, but like Keeler Morphe could just like go crazy next year. And like, he could have been like, based on just like the stuff alone, he could have been, somebody to challenge like for that next, you almost put McDermott in his own like older, like high floor category, but like he could have easily been the top of that tier just based on his stuff. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of, it's easy when you're talking to people for people to say that like, oh, he could be in the top 10 next year. But like when you talk about like a Sosa, some of the other international guys who are kind of slowly making their way through the low minors, you talk about all these pitchers, like I probably heard he could be a top 10 guy next year, about like 10 guys. So, and they're, that was something about this list that was really interesting. Like, it's a snapshot of right now. That's what these are designed to be. But there was also like a fair bit of like defense played on my part, where like, I need to make sure that all these guys who could be the guy who busts out are here. And it's not to say other people were left off, but like that was just a different mindset than being like, okay, this guy's pretty good, he's going to be here. Like, it was a lot of like, there's a chance this guy could be really good, so he's got to be here. And I think that was a fun part of this.
Yeah, it just feels like last year was this pitching and with the hitting, specifically on the international side. It just felt like last year was, as we saw all the top guys get up to the majors, start to settle in, or Mayo, Holiday kind of go up and down. It felt like underneath, there's just this massive swelling of guys who are now they're right there on the precipice of like 2025 could be massive for this organization. Or like I said, some of these guys could end up busting out and it go terribly bad for them. But it just feels like there's this massive group of guys who are just like waiting. And I feel like looking ahead to 2025 is going to be even more fun year to follow these prospects because the sheer number of guys there are.
Yeah, I mean, most nights, like on every affiliate, there's like two guys who are pretty good who are pitching. That's only going to increase as they, start bringing some international pitchers over as the next wave of draftees gets there. There's just not a lot of there's not a lot of weak spots on that side of the depth chart. I'm really fascinated to see, how this year's draftees fare in Aberdeen. We saw some do pretty well last year. It's going to be a challenge to play there, as it always is, and given the kind of reset expectations of how guys spend more time there than they did when it was just like get your 250, 300 plate appearances and get out of here. There's going to be a lot of not pressure, but like the Aberdeen lineup is going to be one. I think if we're trying to focus in on those types of things we're talking about, like guys, this could be a big year. Like if there are a lot of good hitters in Aberdeen's lineup, when you talk about those guys who finished there from Delmarva and the draftees, like that's a place. If Aberdeen's lineup is good, then this system is going to be good.
And now for the final question of the minor league phase, my favorite thing we do every year around this time. 2 years ago, you called Samuel Basayo's ascent into the top 5. Last year, I think your bold prediction was Jackson Ballmeister. And speaking of him, Vivek would like to know, hypothetically, where would Jackson Ballmeister have ranked? If you have any idea.
Because I said he would be 5th last year. Yeah, definitely 5th. No, I was asked that in the BA chat too with him and Chase. I bet I would have had a hard time leaving either of them out. They probably would have been in the bottom half of the top 10, but I think they would have. I have to imagine they would have been. And it said Johnson too. Honestly, like he was really, really good by the time he was traded. But yeah, I would say those guys are in the back half. As for this year's guy,
name your top 5. See. Top 5 for 2025 this time next year.
Okay. I'm going to say Basayo is still 1. That's an easy one. Okay, Basayo is 1 for next year, 2025. So Basayo 1. Cody Mayo will graduate. Heston Kjerstad, I believe, needs one more at bat to graduate, so he's definitely going to graduate. All right, Basayo, Honeycutt, Bradfield, Morphe, first-round draft pick.
I like it.
Yeah, because I mean, if Keil Morphe is good, he's going to be like
top 100.
He's going
potential.
to, that's going to explode.
Yeah.
Because it's just wild. But that, I feel good about that. It's not very bold, oh my God, you picked the guy that throws 100. Like, good job. But
you picked the 18-year-old kid who skipped an entire crucial level of development down there, straight to Delmarva, which is just still mind blowing. But
yeah,
and is not large.
Yeah,
he's not big.
I saw Morphe throw at the end of the year, and the number one question that kept popping up in our Discord while I was there is, how short is he? And it's like, all right, here's a picture of him. You judge for yourself. I have no clue.
Yeah, someone described him to me as like, remember what Zach Davies was like, but tiny. It's like...
Gene Pinto and Keeler Morphe are going to walk across the country to get to the Orioles Major League bullpen.
They got this.
Yeah.
So, John, before we wrap up this part, and then we'll have you back later this week to break down the majors, when will the Baseball America handbook be dropping? When should we look for that?
Feels like a January type thing. I think it comes out in January. I'm sure you could pre-order it now. It was a really fun list to put together overall, but I think it's usually mid-January the book comes out. Maybe January, February, early February, the rest of the list comes out. I remember we've done the rest of the top 30. Talking to you guys, I think I did it in spring training one year, so that would be like the end of February. But shortly, I think it'll be available in print soon. I'm pretty positive that it's close to being finalized, because this is usually when they start asking me questions about, what was I thinking when I did this, and telling me I made mistakes that they need to fix, and just making sure they're fixing them the right way.
Well, that does it for this part of our conversation with John. He will be back later this week to help us break down the Orioles offseason so far and what might lie ahead for them as we approach the winter meetings. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. Nick has been pumping out about an article a week, so if you're not a subscriber to that yet, go check that out. And you can head over to our Patreon community and sign up to become a member today. We're also offering patrons the ability to gift Patreon memberships to friends and family over the holidays. So if you're already a member of our Patreon community, be sure to look into that offer. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.